One of the most powerful adjustment layers is the curves adjustment layer. In this image, I want to add contrast to the entire image and then make both tonal and color corrections to the couch, and then finish off by just adding an off-center vignette. So from the bottom of the layers panel, I'll select the curves adjustment layer. And similar to the levels adjustment layer, we see a histogram here within the curve this time. We've got our auto options like we had before, so I can click on that in order to make an auto correction. And we can reset it using the reset icon. I can also set my black and white points just by dragging these two sliders, the black slider on the left or the white slider on the right. And if we hold down the option key, we can see those values that are being clipped. But the great thing about curves is that not only can I set my black and my white point, I can add a point on the curve. Now, this one point in the center of the curve would act just like the gamma correction, or that one point in the center of the levels adjustment layer. But in curves, you can add up to 16 different points. So if I wanted to add some contrast, I could lower the curve in the shadow area here and then add another point in order to raise the curve in the highlights. Now, one thing to be careful of is there are only a certain amount of values in the image. So as you raise the curve in one area, you're increasing the slope of one area, but that means you have to decrease the slope in another area. So if I were to go too far here and say bring the slope down, well, we're going to get flattened areas in our shadows. Or it might be more evident if I bring it up like this, and we can see now that all of the areas in the shadow areas, yes, they've been raised and the highlights have been brought down, but the image looks terrible because all of this mid-tone area in here has been flattened to just a gray value. So just keep that in mind when you're adding these different points. You don't really want to see a flat portion of your curve, or if you do, you at least need to check in the image to make sure that you haven't lost detail that you want. All right, let's reset this again. And then I'm going to make an adjustment directly on screen using the on-screen adjustment tool. I can position my cursor anywhere in the image, and you can see wherever I position it, we get a bouncing ball on the curve in the properties panel. So if I want to make an adjustment to my highlights, I can click and then drag down to darken them or drag up to lighten them. I'm going to drag them down a little bit just to darken the highlights. And then I'm going to click underneath the couch area in the shadow areas, and I'm going to darken them down as well. But then I want to click in the mid-tone areas, maybe around here in the couch, and click and drag up. So what we've done is we've added contrast, and I can see that S curve in the properties panel. Now, if I ever need to delete a point, I can select the point and then just tap the delete key. And of course, I can always add more right there on the properties panel. So we've made an adjustment to the entire image. I'm now going to switch to the Object Select tool, set the mode to rectangle, and drag out a rectangle around this chair. Now I see it's grabbed a little bit too much in some areas, so I'm going to refine this by using the lasso tool. I'll hold down the Option key. That'll allow me to subtract this area, the leg, from the selection, and then I'll hold down the Shift key in order to select this corner. Oh, and I didn't see this area here. Again, I'll hold down the Option key and I will select that in order to remove it from my selection. Excellent. I'll add a second curves adjustment layer from the bottom of the layers panel. And while I'm going to add a little bit of an S curve here in order to add some contrast, I also want to go in and change the color using the individual color channels. So I'm going to select the reds here and just increase the amount of reds by moving the point in the upper right to the left. And then I'm going to move down to the blues, and I'm actually going to subtract some of the blues out of this area, getting rid of kind of that blue tone and making it a little bit more towards the reds and oranges, just warming it up a little bit. All right, we'll add one more curves adjustment layer. This time I'm going to use the elliptical marquee tool in order to select an area around the booth. I didn't quite start my selection in the right place, so I'm going to hold down the space bar, and that will enable me to reposition it while I still have the mouse down. Then I'll release the space bar and continue to draw it. I want to add a vignette to this, so I actually want to select the inverse. And then I'll add my curves adjustment layer. I'll bring the center point of my curve down to darken the edges, and then to soften it so I can't tell the difference between what's been edited and what hasn't, I'll use the mask area on the properties panel and just put a very large feather on that area. So if I hold down the Option key and we click on the eye icon, we can see a little before and after. I might need to adjust that feather a little bit more so we can't quite see the effect of the vignette. Or if I think the vignette's too strong, we can click on the icon for the adjustment layer and just make less of a change to the curve.